Oh, hi, I'm Codex. It's been a while. Listening to music, relaxing, not living in the woods. Cited references will appear in the top left corner like this. If you're bored, that's okay. If you disagree, that's okay. Let's talk about it in the comments. Have you ever gotten frostbite before? Maybe when you were a kid, you played outside for too long on a snowy day, and no matter how much hot water you'd run over your skin, you'd still feel moderate pain. I grew up in Northwest Ohio, where the winters are hellishly cold, and I got frostbitten quite often. Naturally, I associate winter not with the holidays, but with, pain. I also associate albums in my life with seasons of the year constantly. For example, I think of classical music with autumn's divergence, or jazz albums with summery pep. Winters are cold, obviously, but it's the only season I can think of that can hurt you. There's an album I've been listening to for whenever it snows outside, and it's an album that I think really doesn't fit in any other seasonal context. Prurient's Frozen Niagara Falls. Released in 2015, Frozen Niagara Falls is an hour-and-a-half caustic rabbit hole of ice, cities, and despair. And it is noisy. But that noise kind of changed the way I think about sound. Permanently.
Fun Fest.
Did you know that Barney the Dinosaur has been used to torture people? I wrote that in the script? The deployment of songs from American television series such as the children's shows Sesame Street and Barney and Friends disrupted thought through natural internal repetition, writes Lily E. Hirsch in her 2012 book, Music in American Crime Prevention and Punishment. Huh. Detailing interrogation techniques used by the CIA with American music, Hirsch writes that, quote, "A particularly illustrative example is I Love You from Barney and Friends, a confirmed part of the military's arsenal used during the War on Terror." Going away from a discussion about ethics, we have grown up with earworms in our day-to-day lives. And I'm not one to judge the ethics of torture, but if Barney represents the commercial experience of music in general in our consumer society, avant-garde music definitely exists against the curb of consumerism. If you're into contemporary music, you're probably familiar with noise music. You've seen all the memes, know all the meme noise albums. Maybe noise is a serious art form that you view through a highly nuanced critical lens. Maybe noise is a hilarious joke to you. Whatever the case, what even is noise music? It's noise, sure, but noises can be harsh, squiggly, rhythmic, melodic, atonal. Noise is just formless. As Hirsch asks, according to this idea of music's functioning in programs of torture, why play composed music at all? Why not simply play loud noises, crashes, or cries? I urge you, don't feel like you're missing out if you can't listen to noise music because it hurts you. Take your hearing very seriously. But what makes noise music any different than pain music?
A history of noise music.
Luigi Russolo, former Mario brother and writer of the seminal The Art of Noise manifesto, invented some box thing called Intunaru Mori, a hand-cranked instrument that would rattle or bow drums inside. Either because people were getting more artsy-fartsy or because World War II alienated everyone, a whole new genre of music composition was born. The term musique concrète
Musique concrète
described pieces that utilized electronic machines or cut up tape in their compositions. Electronic musique concrète compositions would be later funded for commercial music thanks to public research facilities. In the US, for example, facilities such as the San Francisco Tape Music Center pioneered experimentation and integrated electronics into contemporary classical music. Morton Subotnick from the San Francisco Tape Music Center and his 1967 album Silver Apples of the Moon in particular had commercial appeal among regular consumer music circles. The integration of electronic instruments into the mainstream had also seen success with artists such as Wendy Carlos, whose Moog covers of Bach compositions broke into the mainstream with Switched on Bach. There are countless examples of contemporary composers during the 20th century who managed mainstream appeal with experimental music, but Punk and metal were also becoming a thing. Avant-garde classical was cool and all, but DIY was wholeheartedly against consumer culture. And the music was decidedly deceptive, too. Violent lyrics became a subject of debate among concerned parents, such as the PMRC's Filthy 15 lists of artists deemed to have written songs with explicit content. The earliest industrial music coexisted with the likes of punk rock and metal because they embraced abrasion in music. For example, Throbbing Gristle had stripped down their instruments to fully embrace drum machines, samplers, and guitar pedals for sonic effect. Fast forward. Merzbow, Masana, Garo, Gary, Gay. A slew of Japanoise artists make a name for themselves in the United States throughout the 90s who are starting to pick up on the artsier side of noise music. Dominic Furnow, aka Prurient, makes his record label Hospital Productions in 1997. Prurient, originally formed as a band, encompasses Dominic's solo material as of late, but Dominic settled on his challenging sonic identity with Prurient, performing both vocals and electronics at a very early stage. Prurient's style is identified with ear-splitting, patience-testing feedback, and compressed and shrieked vocals. Dominic's projects have always stood out to me because he's done everything. From noise to techno to ambient rainforest sounds to... Maybe testing my comfort level is why I was intrigued by noise music in the first place. And people are able to be invested in weird or painful noises as actual music. I mean, I bump Luigi Rossolo's Migos collab track every day.
Raindrops, drop top, smoking, no cooking, the hot pot.
Frozen Niagara Falls is just one album in Dominic's colossal discography. Released on Profound Lore Records, it's an hour and a half, but don't let that time intimidate you. And don't let the noise intimidate you either. Again, please stop if you don't feel like listening to this album is okay for your ears. If you're like me, and you take your hearing with respect, you'll come to find that the distortion actually paints a very vivid picture of a depraved life in a city surrounded by frost and pain and love. That being said, I can't listen to the first track of this album, Myth of Building Bridges. I won't play it because it's painful, but I'll just describe it. It starts off with like this sine wave pitch of like an ee, and then there's another like ee, but then that ee sounds lower, and then there's like a layered on top of it of the first ee, so it all becomes like for 10 minutes. Right off the bat, Dominic just wants you to feel uncomfortable. He immediately sets the scene with the repeating lines. We are unwanted. We are people. Raindrops cling to propane tanks. The guillotine is sleeping. Children pass by on flatbed trucks. Children of salmon. Children of coal. By contrasting this imagery with this painful noise, we're in a cold, cold world. It's a grisly, unwanted, cold world, full of propane tanks, guillotines, and flatbed trucks, relics of industry. We're people, but we're only made up of meat and industry, salmon and coal. That was awful. Okay. Next track. I've had this track stuck in my head for the past year and a half. A kick drum, a brick thrown against a filing cabinet, a badger inside a washing machine. I don't care. It's so catchy. I was doubtful of the first track on Frozen Niagara Falls on my first listen, but Dragonflies to Sew You Up completely reversed my initial hesitations. I finally knew that I was in for a wild ride. Dragonflies to Sew You Up is steel against steel, with glacial synths humming beneath fury. And it's another great example of Dominic using distortion to create atmosphere. Distortion collapses the mix atop one another on all of these tracks, and we're left to piece together the stories that each of them tell. Every lyric becomes a line of poetry, suffocating underneath a giant blizzard. However, this noise isn't really a one-trick pony. As a matter of fact, Dominic originally wanted Frozen Niagara Falls to be a solely acoustic album. The original idea was to make a 100% acoustically generated album in that every sound source would be acoustic. When I first started, all I had was a 12-string guitar and literally a bucket of rocks. I always like to work with a restriction. Placing restrictions on yourself is oftentimes a way to break through into some unfamiliar territory. And with noise, it's important to keep trying to step outside of whatever feels natural and comfortable to you. Maybe these minimal restrictions are ways that Dominic wants to make the noise speak for itself. The synths that Dominic uses under distortion become fever dreams, panicking the music even further.
I believe what you tell me. I listen to what you say. I pray that your eyes and knowledge.
On that note, ambience and solace appear at a moment's notice on Frozen Niagara Falls.
There's an anger at the bottom of your house. Like a bald-faced orange dragon. Let it go, let it go, let it go.
Every relationship Earthrise is a Berlin schoolish repetition. Shoulders of Summer Stones is a misty cooldown after Poinsettia Pills' caked vocal onslaught. And again, no matter the length of this track, 10 minutes or otherwise, some of these tracks even total 20 seconds, I can't help but fall in love with how equally calm and visceral some of these moments feel. Something like wintry, warm, ebbing and flowing, or dripping like a frozen waterfall. Oh. Anyone who's been to Niagara Falls has been drawn to the magnetism, curiosity, and wonder of what it would be like to jump in. In that sense, the album is more about acceptance rather than a return home. It's accepting who you are, even if that means it's always going to change. Themes of loss and love mix into this consistent wintry noise, and Dominic's screams feel more poetic than angry. And when Frozen Niagara Falls gets angry, it makes itself present, mashing and gnarling its way into your headphones.
It's okay to be hungry. Hunger is not. I'll meet you there.
Then, after an hour and a half of noise, Christ Among the Broken Glass. In my opinion, the scariest track on the whole record. Christ Among the Broken Glass terrifies me, but it's not scary in the same way that the preceding tracks were. Instead of harsh noise, we get a guitar, a dumpster fire, a bridge underpass lined with tents, frankincense seeping out of trash cans, an emaciated man in robes and shackles spooning baby food to poor people, whispering after shouting for so long. These nothing people that live in these tents, they're beggars. When they are being helped by this Christ figure, we don't know what happens to them in the end. There's a hole. We don't know where the hole is. We don't know where the hole goes to. But Christ leads them there. On the physical packaging of Frozen Niagara Falls, Dominic writes these instructions to the listener. Listen at night while snow falls silently under streetlights. At one point, I wanted to see for myself what Dominic envisioned for Frozen Niagara Falls, so on one snowy night, I faced my window, queued up the album, looked at a street lamp down an alley, and just sat there. Just watching the street lamp. Rising steam from the chimney, pine trees swaying, obscured by sheets of frost dotting the sky. When I'm in a snowstorm, I get frisson. In the back of my mind, I'm afraid of being in this blizzard or freezing to death or being alone in the woods. Maybe no sound is safe. Whether it's harsh-sounding frequencies or Barney the Dinosaur, sound has the ability to hurt people. Dominic challenges the idea that noise music isn't narrative-driven or that noise music is too artsy to be taken seriously. It's not painful music, it's more than that. Frozen Niagara Falls is blinding, it's catchy, it's solemn, it's ominous. A light in a snowstorm.
cool zoo? Well, let's make our very own alphabet zoo on the next Barney and Friends.
Happy holiday!